Hi. So, what I'm going to talk about here is an issue that I've kind of put to the back of my head for a while because, other things have been going on, but also it hadn't really come to the fore until quite recently, and the results of the last general election. The SNP done well in Scotland. That's just the fact. They done electorally very well. Slightly short of the 2015 result, but still they swept the board. Let's not beat around the bush. The SNP swept the board in Scotland. So many people would say they now have a democratic mandate to push for independence. But it isn't a foregone conclusion that the people who voted SNP done so because they want to see Scotland break away from the UK. Sure, a large number of them will have low sentiments because they'll be long-term SNP supporters, and that's where their politics lie. But I think a lot of the people who have went SNP have maybe done so as a protest against Labour or indeed the Conservatives in Scotland. And even Nicola Sturgeon acknowledged that. I want to read out something that the Prime Minister has posted, in fact, a copy of his letter to Nicola Sturgeon at Holyrood. But before I do that, I'll just say a few words about Nicola Sturgeon. Some unionists, obviously, most unionists are very wary about her because she is the leader of the Scottish nationalist movement. Some unionists, I think, don't appreciate that she is actually a very. I'll give her. I'll recognise that I think she is a very capable politician. I don't think Nicola Sturgeon is stupid. I think she is a clever political operator, and clearly she's doing something right within the party mechanisms. I'm not necessarily talking about for Scotland, but within the party mechanisms in order to have electoral success that she is having. So she's not stupid. And she was smart enough to say that she recognises this unilateral approach that was taken in Catalonia is not the way to independence, because that didn't work in Catalonia. All it done was provoke a hardline response from Madrid. Not that the situation here is exactly the same, but she was right to observe that now. The Prime Minister puts a footnote to this. Today I have written to Nicola Sturgeon. The Scottish people voted decisively to keep our United Kingdom together, a result which both the Scottish and UK governments committed to respect. Let's make 2020 a year of growth and opportunity for the whole of the UK. Before I get into that letter, I want to quote some important figures which really matter in terms of the democratic mandate, because this is something the SNP keeps bringing up, that Scottish people can't be dragged out of the EU against their will. Well, the Scottish independence referendum in 2014, the No side, Better Together, voted 2,001,926 in favour of staying within the United Kingdom. And those in favour of independence were 1,617,989. I'll read that again. No, that is against independence, 2,001,926. Yes, 1,617,989. Now, the EU referendum 2 years later in 2016, the results from Scotland were remain in the EU, 1,661,191, leave the EU, 1,018,322. So in 2014, the Better Together campaign was victorious for the campaign to stay in the UK. And in 2016, the pro stay in the EU campaign won. They got the majority of the results. But if we look at those statistics again, this means that more Scots voted to stay in the United Kingdom in 2014 than Scots who voted to stay in the EU in 2016. And I'll read those statistics out yet again. Scottish independence referendum 2014, stay in the UK, no, 2,001,926. EU referendum 2016, remain in the EU, 1,661,191. Now, why does this matter? It matters because the SNP bank a lot on this idea that the British government's undemocratic, that, oh well, they're going against the will of the Scottish people. But the SNP has went against the will of the Scottish people in 2014 by continuing to push this, continuing to demand another referendum, continuing to obsess about independence. That shows the disrespect for the over 2 million Scots who voted to stay in the UK in 2014. Now, some will say, oh, but the opinion has changed since then. And granted, it may be a bit closer now. It may be that some of those people who voted to stay in the UK have now changed their minds. That happens. But are we going to get into a situation where every time the losing side of a referendum doesn't get its way, then they'll just keep pushing for another referendum? Because if that's the situation, we're going to end up a laughingstock. We're going to end up incredibly politically unstable, actually. Scotland is part of the United Kingdom, so whilst the majority of Scots chose to stay in the EU and they were disappointed, this ignores the fact that many people in England were also disappointed by the result. I was disappointed. I don't like Brexit. It's not how I voted. But I accept that the majority of people voted for Brexit. Um, you can whittle it down and say, well, this was the result in each of the home nations, but Scotland is part of the UK. That's just the fact as it stands. Um, anyway, this is the Prime Minister's letter to Nicola Sturgeon. Dear Nicola, thank you for your correspondence of 19th of December 2019. I've carefully considered and noted the argument set out for a transfer of power from the UK Parliament to the Scottish Parliament to allow for further independence referendums. And he's writing that in the plural sense because if the SNP lost this one, they wouldn't give up. They'd keep pushing for another referendum and another referendum. You and your predecessor made a personal promise that the 2014 independence referendum was a once-in-a-generation vote. The people of Scotland voted both the Scottish and UK governments. The people of Scotland voted decisively on that promise to keep our United Kingdom together, a result which both the Scottish and UK governments committed to respecting the Edinburgh Agreement. The UK government will continue to uphold the democratic decision of the Scottish people and the promise that you made to them. For that reason, I cannot agree to any request for a transfer of power that would lead to further independence referendums. Another independence referendum will continue the political stagnation that Scotland has seen for the last decade, with Scottish schools, hospitals and jobs again left behind because of a campaign to separate the UK. It is time that we all work together to bring the whole of the United Kingdom together and unleash the potential of this great country. And it's worth noting that some of the Labour leadership contenders, I believe Clive Lewis, I'm not sure about Keir Starmer, but I haven't seen any of the major leadership candidates give a solid, assertive stance that they would be against a Scottish independence referendum or indeed Scottish independence. And it may well be that that's political manoeuvring. They're trying to regain lost Labour votes in Scotland. I don't know what it is. But I think it makes all the sense in the world that a British Prime Minister, or someone who aspires to be British Prime Minister, and this is one of my issues with Jeremy Corbyn, is absolutely solid on this. I mean, put it this way, if an American state tried to secede from the American Union, would Donald Trump or Joe Biden, if Biden succeeds him, or any American president, simply say, oh, well, we'll let them decide and see what happens? No, they would be very decisively against it. Would a French president simply stand by and watch Corsica break away from France? Would a Canadian premier be okay with Quebec breaking away? If this goes ahead, if there is another referendum and it is marginally in favour of independence, then we would actually be the first major Western democracy in modern times to break itself apart. I think that would be an utter tragedy. I was in Edinburgh on referendum day. I remember how divisive that atmosphere was. Referendums are divisive by nature. And that's what we've seen with these two big referendums. I want nothing more than the dust to settle in this country and for some clarity going forward. Yes, there are a lot of questions about Brexit. I get that. But I really am warming to the idea that we just give this a chance. I do think there is a lot of doom mongering on the Remain side, and I'm saying that as someone who voted Remain. It's legitimate that concerns are heard, that they're not just silenced. But we haven't left yet. We don't know what's going to be a complete disaster. Yes, there's a lot of predictions, there's a lot of speculation on both sides. Let's see what happens. If it turns out to be a total disaster, then the Brexiteers and the Leave leaders will need to take responsibility for that. But the point I would make is party politics are secondary to the future of this nation state, the future of the United Kingdom. The Conservatives can be voted out of office. I mean, the SNP have the Holyrood Assembly. They have devolved powers on health, on education, on law and justice, on a range of issues. Um, and I just think that another referendum would only cause bitter divisiveness in Scotland. There's already a divisive atmosphere there. This would only increase it. And what if it was extremely close? What if it was too close to call? Then what? Another referendum and another referendum? I'm not going to mince my words. I'm not going to sit on the fence on this. I believe in the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is my country. So I don't take a neutral stance on this. Okay? I've been attacked before on this channel by people saying, oh, but Nathan, what about this? What about that? Look, don't be surprised that I take a strong stance in favour of the UK. This is my country. I don't want to see the country broken up. We do not live in a totalitarian state. And when I see nationalists talk about the oppression of Westminster, they act as if the tanks are being sent in to put down the brave Scottish rebels. It's nothing like that. In fact, if we want to actually look at the record of the Union, Scotland's greatest times have come under the Union. Okay, the Scottish Age of Enlightenment was under the British Union in the 1820s. This has been arguably the most successful political union in history, actually, in terms of what the United Kingdom, the influence this country has had on the world. Certainly as a superpower when we were an empire. The empire's gone, but we are still a great power, and there are people out there, and there are powerful forces out there, not least Putin's Russia, that would like nothing more than to see this country break up and to see the United Kingdom humiliated on the world stage. Now, call me old fashioned, but I'm patriotic enough to be against that. I'm not going to say the United Kingdom is perfect, but whatever problems we have, I do not think they're solved by just breaking the country up. And the SNP isn't being honest with the Scottish people. They're acting like they'll just automatically get to stay in the EU. At best, there's a vague line from the EU on this. Now, I can say the EU has suggested that they would have to wait their turn, but let's say I'm neutral on this one, right? Let's say, even if that's not the case, at best it's vague. The EU isn't wholeheartedly saying, oh, sure, an independent Scotland can just rejoin. For one thing, they want good relations with London post Brexit, and I think they value that more than pandering to the Scottish nationalists. Plus, it would obviously galvanise separatists in France and Spain. And then what? Those governments aren't very well going to humour that idea. So basically, what I'm driving at is no one should be surprised that a British Prime Minister's taken a strong stance on this. And those who say, oh, look at the damage the Tories have done. Well, Scotland's not a single party state. You have a choice. You can vote SNP, you can vote Labour, you can vote Liberal Democrat, you can vote Green. Okay? So if you hate Tory rule, you can't say that you've got no choice because the Scottish powers are devolved in most areas. Anyway, I'm pleased the Prime Minister's taken a robust stand. Prime Minister Corbyn would have sat on the fence with this. But no one should be surprised that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is not going to stand by and watch the United Kingdom disintegrate because of a referendum that really only the SNP is pushing for. Like I say, this sweeping result by the SNP doesn't necessarily mean a sweeping motivation for independence, most opinion polls have showed that at best it is very close. And most of them show that there is a majority for staying in the UK. The national newspaper, which is kind of the nationalists' mouthpiece, had a piece saying, oh, like directly addressing Scottish Union and saying, kind of give us a chance. But I found the overtones of the cover pretty patronising in the way that they were saying, oh, we know best. I mean, that's basically the overtones that they were coming out with. But here's the bottom line: are we going to have referendums every time? I mean, actually, I've been against the second EU referendum, even as someone who voted Remain, because I know that it would only trigger more uncertainty and more divisiveness. And I'm saying that as someone who didn't vote for Brexit. Like I say, if Brexit's a disaster, then the Brexiteers, they need to accept that. They can't blame the EU and they can't blame those of us who voted Remain. They need to accept that. But referendums do not enhance democracy, in my opinion. I am more convinced that all they do is create division. I just hope that, well, I think a big issue depends on the Scottish parliamentary elections next year. But the 2010s were a decade of profound political uncertainty in this country, profound political divisions. I want the 2020s to be a lot more stable. And that might sound a bit naive at this point, but I think the only way for that to happen is for the country to have some degree of unity. So I plead with my fellow Remainers who believe in the United Kingdom. Um, we have to accept at this point Brexit's going to happen, and let's not be dystopian. It isn't going to be the end of the world. I don't think it's going to be the utopia that some of the Brexiteers are making it out to be, but nor is it going to be the end of the world. Let's just give it a chance. And let's not be so pessimistic about a country that we all love. Or at least I would hope you do. If you if you feel so aggrieved by Brexit that you actually have hostile feelings to the United Kingdom, I would question your arguments that it's for the good of this country if you actually feel hostile towards this country. Anyway, that's my honest views. You can agree or disagree, but don't expect me to sit on the fence when it comes to the country I care about.